Today on the John Ankerberg Show, does advancing science refute or prove the Genesis 1 creation account? My guest is astronomer and astrophysicist Dr. Hugh Ross, who received his PhD in astronomy from the University of Toronto and did postdoctoral research at Caltech on quasars and galaxies. Why doesn't Genesis 1 tell us about the dinosaurs or the Neanderthals? Why does God only tell us about the creation of Adam and Eve? We invite you to join us to hear a professional astronomer answer these questions. Welcome to our program. I'm here with astronomer and astrophysicist Dr. Hugh Ross, and we're talking about Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 2, which is criticized by a lot of people in our society and around the world. Does it have to be? Does advancing science prove Genesis 1 and 2? And today I want to talk about, the kids all ask, where did the dinosaurs come in? You know, I haven't heard about them yet. And then some of the adults that have gone to school, they're saying, hey, I'm hearing about these bipedal primates. I'm hearing about Neanderthals and Heidelberg man, and I'm hearing about other ones. Where did they come in? But then we finally want to get to, how did God bring Adam and Eve together, and what is different about them that is different than all the other animals that are created? So Hugh, let's start it off. Genesis 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and we said that the heavens and the earth is a phrase that should be interpreted. The universe, God created the whole universe, the whole shooting match. Give me a summary of where we're at, bring us up to the animals.
Sure. Well, you go through Genesis chapter 1, it talks about God creating the universe, and it takes you down to the surface of the waters of planet Earth, how God transformed the atmosphere from being opaque to where light could get through to the surface, which would allow photosynthesis to begin. Then you got the water cycle in creation day 2. You get to creation day 3. This is when the planet gets transformed from being a water world to where you now have both water and land masses on the surface, which allows nutrients to be recycled so you can sustain life for a long period of time. And then it says that God created vegetation on these new land masses. Then you get to creation day 4, where God transforms the atmosphere from being a hazy, translucent atmosphere towards transparent, where creatures on the surface of the earth for the first time can see the sun, moon, and stars that God had created earlier.
Now, just a quick note. On the 4th day, the Bible says God made 2 great lights. God made the sun to rule the day and the moon to rule the night, along with the stars. But the Hebrew word used here for God making the sun, moon, and stars is the Hebrew word asah, not the Hebrew word bara. The Hebrew word bara is a very special word that is only used referring to God bringing something like the universe into existence from nothing, ex nihilo, while asah is used to refer to the act of God shaping, forming, or fashioning the sun, moon, and stars in just the right way from materials that He had already made so life could exist on earth. Now let's continue.
Creation day 5, that's when God creates animals in the ocean, swarms of these small sea creatures, and then He creates something brand new, which is a reference to birds and mammals that are endowed with mind, will, and emotions so that they can serve and please a higher species that He's not yet created, a reference to us human beings. And creation day 6, it talks about how God created 3 distinct categories, these advanced land mammals, the short-legged land mammals, the rodents, 2 different kinds of long-legged land mammals, herbivores and carnivores, that humans could use to launch and sustain civilization. Last of all, He uses the word create again to refer to us human beings that are not only physical and soulish, we're spiritual. And it's a spirit within us that causes us to ask questions. Is there something beyond the universe? What happens when I die? Is there a God that's behind all of this? And can I relate to that God? And can I serve and please that God? So as these birds and mammals were designed to serve and please a higher species, we humans were designed to serve and please a higher being, namely God Himself. Those are the highlights. Now, the other creation texts in the Bible fill in a lot of details that you don't see described in Genesis chapter 1. And yeah, you say, why no mention of dinosaurs? Why no mention of Neanderthals? Well, God inspired the Bible to communicate to all generations. So it uses vocabulary that gets understandable to all generations. So it doesn't mention neutrinos. It doesn't mention the bipedal primates because they weren't discovered until the 19th century. It doesn't mention dinosaurs for the same reason. They weren't discovered until the 19th century, but they're implied in the other creation texts, especially in Psalm 104.
Yeah, and we're getting close to day 7, which comes right after the creation of Adam and Eve. And day 7, what did you see as a young guy that had no church, had no Christians that you knew, and you weren't a Christian, your family wasn't a Christian, all you had was a Bible. But when you were 7 years old, you started reading books on astronomy and astrophysics. You're a genius in terms of science, and you were picking up stuff and going to the universities to pick up their books, and it's continued. And even today, you can remember what you read when you were 7 years old, the paragraph and the page that you were actually reading this information
What happened
on.
when I was growing up is that every year I would look at a different subdiscipline of astronomy. And it was at age 16, I spent a year studying cosmology, the science of the origin and history of the universe. And that's when I realized, hey, there's all these different explanations, but the one that has the data to support it is the Big Bang creation model, which means the universe has a beginning. And I said, if there's a beginning, there has to be a cosmic beginner. So I said, I need to find that cosmic beginner.
Yeah, you didn't know who the creator was, and
Right.
you wanted to know who the creator was, and how did you go about finding out who he was? You said, let's read all the holy books that we've got.
Well, I actually began by reading the books of Immanuel Kant, because he's kind of considered
Okay.
the father of
Sure.
cosmology. But I realized, and I read the Critique of Pure Reason, he didn't have the space-time concepts correct. And that's when I began to look at the world's holy books, the Hindu Vedas, which describe a reincarnating universe.
And why can't the universe have a reincarnating?
Well, the Vedas say it restarts every 4.32 billion years. So I knew the numbers were wrong, but I also knew the universe had way too much entropy to allow there to be a mechanism to restart the universe. So I said, the Hindus don't have it right.
Right?
I looked at Buddhism and realized, well, they have the same cosmology, so they don't get it right. Looked at the Quran, the creation texts in the Quran contradicted one another, especially one that said that the stars were closer to us than the planets. And I looked at some other holy books, but eventually I picked up the Bible that was given to me in the public school, began to go through it, and said, boy, this book is different. It gets everything correct. It actually correctly predicts future scientific discoveries. I spent 2 years trying to find a provable error or contradiction in the Bible. I found lots of texts I didn't understand, but no provable errors or contradictions. And I found over 100 places in the Bible where it accurately predicted future scientific discoveries, including even predicting 4 of the fundamental features of what we call the Big Bang creation model. You know, no astronomer even hinted about a Big Bang until the 20th century. And so I actually went through an exercise of calculating the probability that the Bible could have correctly predicted all these scientific discoveries without being inspired by the one that did the deeds. And when that probability was more remote than 1 chance in 10 to the 300, I realized, wait a minute, this Bible has to be inspired by the one that actually did everything, and realize I need to trust everything else the Bible's got to say about how I should live my life. And that's what motivated me as a sophomore physics student at age 19 to sign my name on the back of a Gideon Bible, committing my life to Jesus Christ and receiving his offer of forgiveness for all the sins that I had committed in my life.
Yeah, I want to throw in a shout out for the Gideons here, because when you were in grade school, the fact is, and you were even thinking about all of these things, and you had no Christians around you, and you didn't have a church even to talk about, there were two guys that just walked in, two businessmen. They had a box, and they put it on the teacher's desk, and they left.
Right.
Okay? Those were the Gideons, and the teacher put the books, and you didn't know what the books were. They were just Gideon Bibles.
Every one in my class took a Gideon Bible home with them.
But you put it on the shelf, and you didn't read it for 6 years.
That's right. It stayed on my shelf unread for 6 years.
And then when you pulled it off, then all of a sudden you read Genesis 1 and 2, and the fact is you said, bingo, this follows the scientific method.
Yes.
And you're laying out the scientific evidence. But I want to get now to the seventh day, because there's two things. One is, first of all, how long was the seventh day? That day, the Lord said that he set aside after he had done all of the creation, and he celebrated it by resting.
For 6 days, God creates. That's his whole focus. On the seventh day, he stops creating. But during the seventh day, he focuses on something way more important, redemption. And that's what kind of got me understanding. You know what? I'm spending all my time studying science. And I realized what the Bible was teaching me about the Sabbath is I need to spend regular time avoiding my science studies and focusing on the most important questions of life. You know, why am I alive? Is there something beyond the universe? What's going to happen to me after I die? Is there a way I can be delivered from this sin that I see all around me? And so that's what kind of got me started looking at the holy books. Yeah,
and the word yom was used there for the seventh day, but you found out that there was no morning and evening, and the fact is the seventh day, there was no stopping to it, and it's still going on. The length period of time, it's still going on according to Hebrews. The fact is, it's a long period of time. And this tipped you off that the other uses of the word yom, when it was referring to day, yom 1 or 2, 3, 4, 5, could be long periods of time as well.
Yeah, I had that right away and recognized these days have to be consecutive long periods of time because we're still in God's seventh day. The seventh day is not yet finished. And you've got two passages, Psalm 95 and Hebrews 4, explicitly stating that. And when I read Genesis chapter 2, I said, wait a minute, a lot of time goes by between God creating Adam and God creating Eve. Yet Genesis 1 says that God created man and woman both on the sixth day. So that told me the sixth day had to be a long time period. And if day 6 and day 7 are long time periods, then all the days are long time periods.
Well, let's pick up Adam here, because the Bible says God took Adam from he was already out of the garden, and he took him from wherever he was at in the world, and he put him into the garden. So Adam got a chance to see what the world was like, not paradise, okay? And this gets into the fact, did animals die before there was sin in the world? Well, if it was a long period of time and you had animals and they were reproducing, some of them had to die.
Yeah, the text is clear that God created Adam from the dust of the earth outside the Garden of Eden and put Adam in the garden. So Adam knew the difference between the wilderness and this garden that God had tended in advance for him. And so he took care of the garden. So when God told him, in a day that you eat of the forbidden fruit from the tree, you will die, Adam already knew about that because he'd seen what life was like outside of Eden.
Give me the list of things that God had Adam do that tells me that he spent a long time doing the list that God gave him. Just Adam.
He puts him in the Garden of Eden. The first thing the text says is that Adam had an opportunity to watch the trees grow. So it takes a while to see growth in trees.
Right.
So he watched the trees grow, and then God said, now I planted this garden for you. I want you to maintain it in the condition that you see it.
So he became a gardener.
So he became a gardener. He began to tend the garden, and it was a beautiful garden. So I'm sure he really enjoyed the gardening. But then God said, now I want you to name all the soulish animals that are here in the garden with you. And so what God was doing was first introducing Adam to the creation that's purely physical. The second thing he did is he introduced him to the creation that was both physical and soulish. And what it tells us in the text is that he examined each of these soulish creatures and gave them an appropriate name. And Adam discovered that his creator had designed each of these bird and mammal species to relate to him in a different way. And then what the text says is that Adam realized, they all relate to me in a different way, but none of them, even the whole lot of them together, don't really fulfill all my relational needs. And this was when God looked down on Adam and said, he is lonely. And then God performs anesthesia on Adam, puts him into a deep sleep, takes something from his side. A lot of English translations say a rib, but all it really tells us is God took some flesh from Adam's side. It could have been as small as a biopsy, but he used that along with the dust of the earth to create Eve. Then we have Adam recovering from his surgery. He wakes up, he sees his new creature, and the Hebrew word recorded coming out of Adam's mouth, the moment he sees Eve,
Upon Am.
yeah, that word, and is used about 20 times in the Old Testament, almost always is translated at long last. So this is where I concluded. Day 6, likewise, must be a significant passage of time, because look at all that happens between God creating Adam outside the garden and creating Eve inside the garden. And then the text tells us after he created Eve, he rested from his work of creation. So that's the final act of God's creation.
Yeah, two things. One is talk about the bipedal primates that some are finding, and the fact is I want you to sum this up with how can people come into a personal relationship with Jesus, the redemption plan that God has made that you took advantage of, how can they take advantage of that? But answer the Neanderthals first.
Yeah, we have now the fossil evidence that there's 10 or 11 distinct species of bipedal primates that preceded what they call anatomically modern humans. And we notice is that they existed from about 6.5 million years ago until about 45,000 years ago. And we don't see it fitting an evolutionary timeline. So the brain size does not increase linearly, it goes up and down like this. In fact, the most recent find, Homo florensis, has got a brain 4 times smaller than ours. So the smallest one shows up last. And Homo florensis also doesn't have the bipedal capability of, say, Neanderthals and the Denisovans. The bipedalism doesn't go up linearly. Again, it's kind of like this. The only linear progression we see is the capacity of these bipedal primates to hunt large-bodied bird and mammal species. So each successive one is a little more capable of being able to provide for itself by hunting large-bodied bird and mammal species.
So they differ from human beings. How?
The human brain is the same size as the Neanderthal brain, but the human brain is a radically different shape. It's basically globular, whereas the Neanderthal brain is more cylindrical. The human brain is a large parietal lobe, and that's where you do all your mathematics and philosophy and theology and reasoning. That's something that Neanderthal lacked. Also, we have a neuronal density that's far greater than what you see in the bipedal primates that preceded us. So it explains why the human brain is so capable. Also, we got a circulatory system that basically feeds. 35% of your blood flow sustains your 3-pound brain. We have dexterity that the bipedal primates don't have. We know that we humans had to be preparing and cooking food because we don't have the jaw structure or the teeth structure to eat nothing but raw food. Even the earliest humans had to be cooking their food, and we humans have a very high caloric need, way higher than the Neanderthals. But the advantage we had is we could pick these poisonous vetches, and we could grind them up, and we could roast them and boil them, which made them safe to eat. So we humans had access to calories the other animals didn't have. But it's our technological capability that really sets us apart.
Yeah. Talk about the fact that in recognizing all of this, you came to believe that the Creator had created all of this because he wanted to have human beings that would have a choice in whether or not they wanted to follow him, know him, okay? He realized they would sin, and he sent Christ to die for their sin, and he offered them a gift. But again, they had the free choice to choose whether or not they would turn him down or they would accept the gift. You accepted the gift. How can other people that are listening to all of this say, I've never thought about all of this stuff this way, but I would like to know the Creator as you know the Creator? And the interesting thing is, they can.
Yeah, the Creator is easy to discover. As it tells us in Romans 1, the creation testifies that there's a Creator. And that's evident to everybody. We all know there has to be a super intellect that's supernaturally designed everything so that we could exist. And God gives every human being a choice of where we want to spend eternity. The Bible also tells us God has written eternity on our hearts. We know we don't cease to exist when we physically die. We continue to exist, and we can choose to spend eternity with God and His followers. We can also choose to have nothing to do whatsoever with God or His followers. We get a choice of where to spend eternity. But what I realized is this God is not only a powerful Creator, He is love. He is love embodied. And His desire is to express love towards me and give me the capacity to express that towards others. He wants me to go on a moral footing, and He's prepared to send me the Holy Spirit that will indwell me and step by step enable me to live a virtuous life. And I says, that's a great offer. I can't turn that down. And so there came a time in my life when I said, look, I know you exist. I know that you've done the ultimate sacrifice to pay for all the offenses I've committed against you and against other people. I want to receive that offer of forgiveness for all the evil I've committed. But I also know you know better than I do what's best for my life. I'm going to make you in charge of my life because you know me better than I do. You know what's best for me. I'll take direction from you for the rest of my life. And yes, please send me the Holy Spirit that will eventually give me the power and the desire and help me to overcome step by step this life of sin that I began my life with.
Yeah, folks, and the Bible promises whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. He saves you when you call, when you want Him. Now, next week we're going to be talking about the 5 best scientific evidences for the God of the Bible. We're also going to talk about how old is the earth. Is the earth young or is the earth old? And there's some controversy among Christians on that question. And we're going to talk about biblical inerrancy. And so I hope that you'll join us.
Stay tuned. John will be right back.